3 weeks after the explosive HOA meeting, Oak Ridge Estates had transformed. What was once a collection of isolated homes had become a genuine community. Weekend barbecues, impromptu front yard gatherings, and children freely playing between houses had become the new normal. The HOA board, with several newly elected members, including Darius as vice president, had revised outdated bylaws and created a transparent system for addressing legitimate concerns. Most importantly, they'd established clear boundaries between community standards and personal property rights. Karen, meanwhile, had retreated into near-total isolation. Her car would leave early in the morning and return late at night, with her blinds perpetually drawn. The few times neighbors glimpsed her, she would hurry inside without acknowledgement. Marcus had settled into a comfortable routine, finally enjoying the home he had worked so hard to purchase. His pool, the inadvertent catalyst for neighborhood change, had become a gathering spot for weekend socials that he hosted for neighbors who had never been invited to the Richardsons in all their years of residency. On a particularly warm Saturday in late summer, Marcus was preparing for another pool gathering when his doorbell rang. Opening the door, he found himself face-to-face with Karen for the first time since the HOA meeting. She looked different, smaller somehow, without the self-righteous anger that had previously animated her features. Her eyes darted nervously as she clutched a manila envelope. "Mrs. Winters," Marcus said evenly, "what can I do for you?" She cleared her throat. "I've come to inform you that I'm selling my house. The new owners will be moving in next month." Her tone was formal, rehearsed. Marcus nodded, unsure how to respond. "I see." "I prepared a document," she continued, thrusting the envelope toward him. "It details all the incidents between us, including my actions regarding your pool and the false reports." Marcus took the envelope cautiously. "Why are you giving me this?" "It's a notarized admission of my behavior," she said stiffly. "My lawyer advised it might be prudent, given the possibility of civil action against me." Realization dawned on Marcus. "You're trying to avoid a lawsuit." Out acknowledging errors in judgment, Karen replied, her words carefully chosen. "The document includes an apology, which I'm not particularly skilled at delivering in person." Marcus studied her face, seeing not remorse but calculation, a final maneuver to protect herself. "Where are you moving to?" "A senior community in Arizona," she answered. "More suitable for my preferences." The implication was clear, a place where she could control her environment without opposition, surrounded by people who looked and thought like her. "I hope you find what you're looking for there, Mrs. Winters," Marcus said sincerely. She seemed surprised by his response, having clearly expected anger or gloating. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, she nodded curtly and turned to leave. "Mrs. Winters," Marcus called after her. "For what it's worth, I never wanted to be your enemy. All I wanted was to live peacefully in my home." She paused but didn't turn around. "The neighborhood has changed," she said quietly. "It's not what it was meant to be." "Maybe it's becoming what it should have been all along," Marcus replied. Without another word, Karen walked stiffly back to her house, a for sale sign already planted in her front yard. That afternoon, as neighbors gathered around Marcus's pool, families of various backgrounds, ages, and lifestyles enjoying each other's company, Darius raised his glass in a toast. To Marcus, he announced, whose simple act of enjoying his own pool somehow managed to free an entire neighborhood. Laughter rippled across the gathering as Marcus shook his head with a smile. "All I wanted was to float in peace." "Sometimes," said Evelyn, the older neighbor who had lived across from Karen for 15 years, "peace requires a little disruption first." As the summer sun glinted off the pool that had started it all, Marcus looked around at the community that had formed in the wake of conflict. New friendships were blooming, children were playing across property lines, and the invisible walls that had divided them for years had finally fallen. A month later, a young interracial couple moved into Karen's former house. The neighborhood welcomed them with an enthusiastic block party, right in the middle of the street, with no permits or permission needed. When the new couple asked about the previous owner, neighbors exchanged knowing glances. "Let's just say," Marcus explained with a smile, "she helped bring us all together, though not exactly in the way she intended." The story of Karen and the pool became neighborhood legend, retold at gatherings and to new residents as the cautionary tale of how one woman's attempts to control and divide had ultimately created something she feared most, a diverse, connected community where everyone belonged. As for Marcus, he would sometimes float in his pool on quiet evenings, marveling at how his simple act of enjoying what was rightfully his had rippled outward, transforming not just his experience of home, but an entire neighborhood's understanding of community. Some battles he had learned were worth fighting, not just for yourself, but for everyone who might come after you, seeking nothing more complicated than the right to belong. As homeowner after homeowner stood up to share their experiences with Karen's harassment, the atmosphere in the HOA meeting room shifted dramatically. Years of intimidation and selective enforcement were being exposed in a public forum, and Karen's carefully cultivated image as the neighborhood's protector was disintegrating by the minute. She reported my children for being too loud in our backyard. One mother explained. They were having a birthday party at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. She had my car towed from in front of my own house because she claimed it was an eyesore, an elderly gentleman added. It was just one day while I was waiting for a repair appointment. The HOA president, visibly uncomfortable, tried to regain control of the meeting. While these concerns are troubling, we're here to discuss the proposed pool regulations. These issues are directly related. Marcus interrupted firmly. The proposed regulations are simply another tool to target specific homeowners while ignoring others. I have documentation showing Mrs. Winters has entered my property without permission at least 7 times in the past month alone to conduct unauthorized inspections of my pool. He connected his phone to the meeting room's projector and played a compilation of security footage showing Karen's repeated trespassing, including tampering with his water main and conducting her tests while he wasn't home. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Karen's face flushed with anger. As the Water Quality Committee chairperson, I have every right. You have no right to enter private property without permission, Darius interjected. That position doesn't exist in our HOA bylaws. You made it up. The HOA president frowned. Is that true, Barbara? He asked, turning to the HOA secretary, who quickly flipped through a binder of documents. There is no Water Quality Committee listed in our current bylaws, she confirmed reluctantly. Karen stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. This is ridiculous. I've dedicated 15 years to maintaining the standards of this community while all of you sat back and benefited from my work. Your work included having the Paddles investigated for running a business from their home because their relatives visited too often, said another neighbor. They were just a family who liked to spend time together. And filing noise complaints every time my kids played basketball in our driveway, added another. Calling the police on me for suspicious behavior when I was unloading groceries at night, said an older black resident who had been quiet until now. Enough? Karen shouted, her voice shrill. I will not stand here and be attacked for protecting our property values. This community was peaceful and orderly before all of you started moving in with your noise and your violations and your different lifestyles. The room fell silent at her outburst, the implication of her words hanging heavy in the air. And what exactly do you mean by different lifestyles, Mrs. Winters? Marcus asked quietly. Karen's eyes darted around the room, suddenly aware of how many people were witnessing her meltdown. I simply mean people who don't respect the established community standards. The standards you decided on? Darius challenged. Because our actual HOA bylaws are much more reasonable than what you've been enforcing through intimidation. The HOA president cleared his throat. I think we need to table the pool regulations discussion and address these allegations at our next board meeting. In the meantime, Mrs. Winters, I must ask you to refrain from any unauthorized property inspections. This is absurd, Karen hissed, gathering her papers with trembling hands. You'll all regret this when property values plummet. I've protected this neighborhood for years. As she stormed toward the exit, she stopped beside Marcus. This isn't over, she said, just loud enough for him to hear. People like you don't belong here. But as she looked around the room one last time, it was clear to everyone present that the power dynamic had permanently shifted. Neighbors who had previously avoided eye contact with her were now standing together, united against her tactics. The following morning, Marcus woke to an unusual sound, laughter and conversation from multiple directions in his previously quiet neighborhood. Stepping outside, he found neighbors introducing themselves to each other, many for the first time despite living doors apart for years. Karen kept us all isolated, explained an older woman who introduced herself as Evelyn from across the street. We were all so afraid of being her next target that we kept to ourselves. Last night changed everything. As the morning progressed, several neighbors stopped by Marcus's house, some bringing welcome gifts they had been too intimidated to deliver when he first moved in. Others sharing their own Karen stories and apologizing for not speaking up sooner. By afternoon, an impromptu neighborhood gathering had formed on the cul-de-sac, with children playing and adults chatting. A stark contrast to the sterile, silent community it had been just days before. The only house that remained dark and shuttered was Karen's, her curtains drawn tight against the newfound community spirit blossoming around her. The morning after discovering his water had been shut off, Marcus woke to find 3 official-looking vehicles parked in front of his house. A county inspector, a representative from the health department, and a code enforcement officer were all examining various parts of his property. Throwing on clothes, Marcus rushed outside. Can I help you? The county inspector looked up from his clipboard. Mr. Johnson, we've received multiple reports about this property in the last 48 hours. Allegations of structural damage, improper pool maintenance creating a public health hazard, and unpermitted modifications to the exterior. Marcus didn't need to look to know Karen was watching from her window, likely recording the entire interaction. None of that is true, Marcus said firmly. This house passed inspection when I purchased it 3 months ago. The pool is regularly maintained by a service I hired, and I haven't made any modifications whatsoever. The health department representative approached. Sir, we have documentation indicating your pool has failed multiple chlorine tests and may be a breeding ground for mosquitoes that could spread West Nile virus. Documentation from whom? Marcus asked, already knowing the answer. And Mrs. Winters filed the reports, the official confirmed. She's certified as a community health volunteer. The woman who submitted these reports has been harassing me since I moved in, Marcus explained, struggling to maintain his composure. She's trespassed on my property multiple times. I have security footage of her entering my yard without permission to conduct those unauthorized tests, and I have records from my professional pool service showing all maintenance is up to code. The code enforcement officer, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. We're required to follow up on all reports, but I'm starting to sense there might be more to this situation. Marcus invited them inside, showing them his home purchase documentation, pool service records, and most damning, the security footage of Karen's repeated trespassing, including her shutting off his water supply and placing the fake utility tag. This is concerning, the county inspector said, exchanging glances with his colleagues. Filing false reports is a serious matter. This isn't just about false reports, Marcus said. I've learned from other neighbors that Mrs. Winters has a history of targeting homeowners who don't match her preferred demographic for this neighborhood, particularly non-white homeowners. As the officials completed their inspection, finding no violations whatsoever, they apologized for the inconvenience. The code enforcement officer lingered behind. Off the record, he said quietly, we've responded to complaints from Mrs. Winters before, multiple times, always against new homeowners who seem to fit a certain pattern. He handed Marcus his card. Document everything. If this continues, there are laws against harassment and filing false reports. As the officials left, Marcus noticed Karen storming across her lawn toward the departing vehicles, clipboard in hand. Through his security system, he could hear her shrill voice demanding explanations, insisting they had missed obvious violations. When the officials drove away without addressing her concerns, Karen's face contorted with rage. She spun toward Marcus's house, catching him watching through the window. For a moment, they locked eyes, and the naked hostility in her expression chilled him. Later that afternoon, Marcus's neighbor Darius stopped by with surprising news. The HOA is holding an emergency meeting tonight, Darius said. Karen's called for a vote on new pool regulations that would require approval for excessive use and mandatory twice-weekly inspections of all private pools. That's absurd, Marcus replied. She can't possibly have the authority to do that. She doesn't, Darius confirmed, but she's banking on low attendance so her friends can push it through. Most homeowners don't bother showing up to these meetings. That's how she's maintained control for years. Then we need to make sure people show up, Marcus said, a plan forming in his mind. Over the next few hours, Marcus and Darius mobilized the neighborhood group chat. By evening, the usually empty HOA meeting was packed with homeowners, many of whom had experienced Karen's harassment firsthand. When Karen arrived with her small cohort of supporters and saw the crowded room, her confident stride faltered. As she took her place at the front, ready to present her new regulations, she found herself facing a community united against her tactics for the first time. The HOA president, visibly surprised by the turnout, called the meeting to order. I understand Mrs. Winters has proposed new regulations regarding private pool usage and inspections. Before Karen could speak, Marcus stood up. Before we consider any new regulations, I'd like to address ongoing harassment that several homeowners, myself included, have experienced from Mrs. Winters, including trespassing, surveillance, false reports to authorities, and tampering with utilities. The room erupted in discussion as other homeowners began standing up, sharing similar experiences spanning years. Karen's face reddened as she realized her carefully constructed position of neighborhood authority was crumbling before her eyes. A week after the trespassing incident, Marcus installed security cameras around his property. It wasn't a purchase he had planned when budgeting for his new home, but Karen's escalating behavior made it necessary. The cameras captured her walking by his house multiple times daily, often slowing to take pictures or make notes on her phone. On Saturday morning, Marcus was startled by the sound of splashing coming from his backyard. He rushed to his security app to find Karen in his backyard, using a testing kit in his pool while meticulously documenting the results. By the time he made it outside, she was already collecting her samples, completely unfazed by his presence. This is trespassing, Marcus stated firmly. I'm calling the police. Karen straightened up, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat. As the HOA Water Quality Committee chairperson, I have the right to test any community water feature. My backyard pool is not a community water feature, Marcus countered, already dialing on his phone. And you know it. Karen's expression hardened. The chlorine levels are well below regulation standards. This poses a health risk to the neighborhood. How does my private pool pose a health risk to anyone but me? Marcus asked incredulously. Mosquitoes, for one, Karen replied without missing a beat. West Nile virus is a serious concern. And property values. Improperly maintained pools decrease neighborhood valuation by up to 15%. When the police arrived, the same officers from the previous incident, they seemed increasingly exasperated with the situation. Mrs. Winters, we've discussed this, the first officer said wearily. You cannot enter private property without permission, HOA position or not. I've filed 17 complaints with the HOA about this pool, Karen insisted, showing them a folder of meticulously documented violations. No action has been taken. Ma'am, the appropriate channel for HOA disputes is through your board and civil courts if necessary, not repeatedly calling emergency services, the second officer explained patiently. Mr. Johnson has the right to press charges for trespassing. Marcus, despite his frustration, decided against pressing charges. I just want her to stay off my property and stop harassing me. After the officers escorted Karen back to her home with a stern warning, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Got your contact from Rob next door. Heard you're having Karen problems. We should talk. I'm 3 houses down. Darius. That evening, Marcus met Darius Williams, a friendly 30-something marketing executive who had moved to Oak Ridge Estates 2 years prior. So you're Karen's newest target, Darius said, handing Marcus a beer as they sat on his front porch. I wish I could say I'm surprised. Has she done this before? Marcus asked. Darius nodded grimly. The Richardsons were the only neighbors she approved of. They were an older white couple who played by her rules. She's driven away 3 homeowners in the past 5 years. Because they weren't white? Marcus asked directly. That's part of it, Darius acknowledged. I'm lucky I have a corporate lawyer as a sister who helped me deal with the bogus HOA violations. The paddles before you weren't so fortunate. They sold after 6 months of constant harassment, noise complaints, parking violations, even accusations of running an illegal business because they had family visit too often. Marcus felt a chill. So this is about me being black in her neighborhood. It's about control, Darius said. Race is just one lever she pulls. Single people, young families with kids, anyone who doesn't fit her vision gets targeted. But yeah, she's particularly aggressive toward non-white homeowners. As they talked, Darius introduced Marcus to a group text with several other neighbors who had experienced similar harassment. They shared documentation of Karen's previous patterns, including her notorious pool inspections, surveillance, and calls to authorities. That night, Marcus returned home with a strange mix of emotions. Anger at the obvious discrimination, but also a sense of community with neighbors who had faced similar treatment. He was about to unlock his front door when he noticed something different. His security system was alerting him that his water had been turned off. Checking around the side of his house, he found his main water valve had been shut off with a bright orange utility maintenance tag attached. A tag that, upon closer inspection, was clearly non-official and appeared to have been printed from a home computer. On his security footage, he saw Karen approaching his water main 2 hours earlier, tag in hand. Marcus realized that what had started as a bizarre misunderstanding had now become something far more sinister. A concentrated campaign to drive him from his home. The day after the police incident, Marcus hoped things would calm down. They did not. He was preparing breakfast when a sharp knock at his front door interrupted his morning routine. Standing on his porch was Karen, this time accompanied by a stern-looking man in a polo shirt who introduced himself as the president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. Mr. Johnson, the HOA president, began formally. We've received some concerning reports about your residency status here. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, coffee mug in hand. Let me guess, Karen here thinks I'm squatting in my own home. Karen's nostrils flared. The Richardsons were founding members of this community. They wouldn't sell without proper vetting of potential buyers through the HOA. The HOA president cleared his throat uncomfortably, while Mrs. Winters does raise some valid concerns about protocol. I have the deed to this house, Marcus interrupted. I went through all the proper channels. The Richardsons sold to me through their realtor, everything above board. The police already confirmed this yesterday. Be that as it may, the HOA president continued, there are certain community standards we maintain at Oak Ridge Estates. Mrs. Winters has noted several violations. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Violations? I've been here 3 months and haven't received any notices. Karen pulled out her phone, scrolling through a series of photos. Improper pool maintenance, unregulated patio furniture, excessive noise. She thrust the phone toward Marcus, showing a picture of him from yesterday, floating peacefully in his pool with headphones on. You've been photographing me. In my backyard? Marcus felt a chill despite the morning warmth. That's an invasion of privacy. It's documentation of violations, Karen countered, her voice rising. And speaking of violations, the Richardsons' pool was never meant to be used for parties. Marcus blinked. I wasn't having a party. I was alone. Last weekend, Karen pressed, you've had visitors using the pool. Young people. Drinking. Marcus remembered his cousins visiting, all in their 20s like him, sharing a few beers while grilling. Nothing rowdy. Nothing past 9 p.m. Those were my family members, and we weren't violating any noise ordinances, Marcus said firmly, and I'd appreciate if you stopped surveilling my property. The HOA president, sensing the tension, attempted mediation. Perhaps we could schedule a proper community introduction at our next meeting. It might help clear up any misunderstandings. Before Marcus could respond, Karen stepped forward. I've already contacted the Richardsons through Facebook. They're very concerned about their home. It's not their home anymore, Marcus said, his patience wearing thin. And I'd appreciate if you both leave my property now unless you have official HOA violations to present. As they reluctantly retreated, Marcus heard Karen saying he doesn't fit the community profile. The property values will suffer. That afternoon, Marcus was startled when his doorbell camera app alerted him to movement on his porch. Checking the footage, he watched as Karen approached his front door with an older couple he didn't recognize. They peered through his windows before Karen pointed toward the backyard, leading them around the side of his house. Setting down his laptop, Marcus rushed outside to find Karen giving what appeared to be a tour of his backyard to the bewildered couple. What exactly do you think you're doing on my property? Marcus demanded. Karen jumped slightly but recovered quickly. Marcus, these are the Baldwins. They're considering purchasing when you inevitably move out. I'm just giving them a preview of the property. The Baldwins looked mortified, clearly not having realized they were trespassing. I'm not moving out, Marcus said evenly, and you are trespassing. All you need to leave immediately. As the embarrassed Baldwins hurried away with apologies, Karen stood her ground. The community has standards, Marcus. The Richardsons understood that. You clearly don't belong here. As she finally turned to leave, Marcus realized this situation was spiraling beyond a simple misunderstanding. Karen wasn't just being difficult. She was on a mission to remove him from the neighborhood by any means necessary. The shrill sound of sirens pierced the peaceful suburban afternoon as Marcus Johnson lounged on his inflatable raft, cold drink in hand. At first, he thought the noise was coming from several blocks away, until he saw two police cruisers pull up in front of his house, lights flashing. Marcus nearly tipped over his float as he scrambled to stand up in the water. He purchased this modest 3-bedroom home in Oak Ridge Estates just 3 months ago after years of saving. The backyard pool, small but pristine, had been the deciding factor. And now somehow it had apparently become a crime scene. Sir, we received a call about trespassing at this address, the first officer said as he approached the fence, hand resting cautiously on his belt. The second officer flanked him, surveying the scene with practiced eyes. Trespassing? Marcus sputtered, water dripping from his swimming trunks as he climbed the pool steps. This is my house. I live here. Before either officer could respond, a shrill voice cut through the air. That's him. That's the one I called about. Marcus turned to see his next-door neighbor, a middle-aged woman with a severe blonde bob and oversized sunglasses, pointing an accusatory finger at him from her side of the fence. He knew her only in passing. She'd never bothered to introduce herself when he moved in, only offering tight-lipped nods when they happened to be outside at the same time. Ma'am, you reported someone trespassing? The second officer asked, turning toward her. Absolutely. He doesn't belong here, she insisted, her voice rising with indignation. The Richardsons own this house. They're on vacation in Europe. This man has broken in and is using their pool. A moment of stunned silence followed before Marcus found his voice. The Richardsons sold this house to me 3 months ago. I have the paperwork inside if you need to see it. That's impossible, the woman, Karen, as Marcus would later learn from other neighbors, snapped. The Richardsons would have told me if they were selling. We're very close. The first officer looked between them, clearly trying to assess the situation. Sir, do you have identification showing this is your residence? Marcus nodded, trying to remain calm despite the humiliation of having to prove he belonged in his own home. My wallet's inside. I can get it, along with my closing documents. As he wrapped a towel around his waist and headed toward his back door, he could hear Karen continuing her tirade. He's probably getting away. He could be stealing things right now. The officers, to their credit, seemed increasingly skeptical of Karen's claims, especially when Marcus returned moments later with his driver's license showing his address and a folder containing his home purchase documents. Everything appears to be in order, ma'am, the first officer finally said, turning toward Karen. Mr. Johnson is the legal owner of this property. Instead of embarrassment or an apology, Karen's face contorted with disbelief. There must be some mistake. The Richardsons wouldn't sell without telling me. He must have forged those documents. Marcus watched in astonishment as what should have been the end of a misunderstanding instead became the beginning of what would prove to be the strangest neighborhood dispute of his life, one that would escalate far beyond anything he could have imagined when he first signed those mortgage papers.